All right. So the following essay is something I have been spending an inordinate amount of hours on. And I'm hoping to try to get back a little bit more to my roots. The podcast with Arthur is still going to be ongoing and it has been a blast, but it hasn't quite been the outlet that I have been craving for all of the thoughts that I have in my head, all of the philosophy I want to share, all of the information I've derived out of books that I've been reading. And what I want to do now is start spreading some of the deeper thoughts that have been trapped in my head. So I'm hoping, perhaps maybe monthly, to put out another essay like this. I will try to get a video version of it on YouTube with pictures and sound and make something that'll be visually entertaining. But I'm also going to upload the audio version of it first on Apple and Spotify and anywhere else where the podcast can be listened to solely. This is something that's very important to me. I am not the best writer, but I do enjoy writing and plan to get better at it. And this is really practice for work I want to do later in the future, but also, like I said, a means to express some of the ideas that have been trapped in my head. This is fun for me, and I'm going to plan to do it regardless, I think, no matter what sort of the outcome is or what people may think of it. But it is also something I do find very important. And so I do hope that people can listen to it and share it if they agree with it. Some of what you may hear might sound pessimistic. I think more so that's just my tone. I'm well aware that the times we live in now are the best. I've read a lot of Steven Pinker's books. I've read a lot of Matt Ridley's books. I'm not delusional. I'm not hysterical. But I do think there are also problems that we need to address. One of those themes will be about the anxious generation. I echo that book quite a bit in this essay. I think there is a moral emergency that we all need to be on board with when it comes to the younger generations. And like I mentioned in the essay, I highly suggest everyone pick up and read The Anxious Generation for the sake of helping out the younger generations. What I hope to do with these essays is just, like I said, express some of the ideas that I've been reading about. I want to make philosophy practical. I'm obsessed with philosophy. Many of you who know me personally know I'm studying in college. I read it pretty obsessively. I always want to talk about it. And that's hard to do in today's age. It's just simply not a shared interest among many people. So I'm using this to share my passion with it. And like I said, make it practical. If it doesn't better anybody's lives, it's kind of just a conglomeration of abstract thought experiments. And I really want to discuss it for the well-being of conscious creatures. That's also why I'm a double major with psychology. I want to use ideas and practices that enhance our well-being. At the end of the day, all we really have is our conscious experience. We want to be happy. I think philosophy and psychology, used in conjunction, are a great means to get to happiness. In this essay, I talk a lot about incentives and distractions. Distractions, like I said, are going to be in theme with what I talk about in the anxious generation. A lot of that has to do with just overindulgence in screen time and the potentially harmful future that kids can have if they are hooked on digital devices too early. Again, I'm going to just resort back to the anxious generation. Jonathan Haidt says it best, and I cite a lot of his work in this essay. Incentive structures, I want to dive a little bit deeper on. One, I had to condense. What you're about to listen to is about an hour of me talking. What I originally wrote was about 3 times longer, and I simply needed to condense in order to make this digestible for everybody. Incentives also inevitably get into things like economics, in which case I am not competent enough to talk on. So I hope you all enjoy this, can learn something from it, and get encouraged by it, even though it might have a slightly pessimistic tone. Again, I'm aware of the times we live in. I'm actually pretty positive about most things. I'm a realist, even though I have an RBF and often sound monotone. I'm quite happy, quite encouraged, but I do think there are problems that need to be addressed. And the following is me sounding the alarm on some of those issues and giving you some good literature and some good psychologists who can help solve those problems. So, I think I have rambled enough. Here is the essay. Distractions and bad incentives have been devouring our souls, but we can still save them. Know thyself. The implications of this directive often assumed to be quoted by Socrates, are ginormous. Knowing your limits, knowing your faults, knowing your purpose, are among various interpretations of this quote, all of which provide immense utility. So much so that Socrates claimed that a life not spent on self-discovery and the pursuit of knowledge was not worth living. Knowing ourselves is conducive to human flourishing, and we need self-knowledge now more than ever. We live in a truly unique time in human history. With the technological advances made over the past century in medicine, communication, and entertainment, life has become more convenient, easier, and safer than ever before. Globally, this has contributed to the longest average lifespan in history and the lowest global poverty rates. With life becoming less risky for most and easier for most, one should be able to assume that the technologically advanced West is the happiest it has ever been, and we should be able to assume that the youngest generation would be the happiest generation alive. If you were to assume all of that, however, you would be very wrong. As life has gotten easier in this regard, many people have become less happy. The technology that has given us advanced healthcare, diverse forms of communication, convenient food delivery, and entertainment is the same technology that keeps us stagnant in our house, distracts us from art and literature, and hinders us from enjoying the great outdoors. This is no trivial matter. We are often distracted from learning our interests, our calling, and the very purpose our souls are longing for. We are learning more about technology and how to uphold prominence in the digital world than we are learning about science, art, global news, or what may interest us. And we are conforming to social media trends or escaping reality through video games or scrolling on our phones rather than learning about ourselves. Not learning about ourselves rids us of a chance to become autonomous and content. We've been caring about the wrong things. If we have an interest that lies in a field that is not lucrative, we often refuse to dig deeper in that interest, and we don't find our passion in it. Many of us don't have hobbies or even know what interests us anymore. As a result, we don't learn about ourselves. We are not incentivized to know ourselves. We are incentivized to follow a career path which makes the most money, incentivized to get views, likes, and followers, or distracted to spend as many hours as we can on our screens, and it is making us miserable, individually and collectively. Section 1. Content creators, influencers, and drifters. According to the Harris Poll, about 30% of children ages 8 through 12 want to become YouTubers, and about 50% of 13 to 18-year-olds want to become social media influencers. The Morning Consult and a few other reports share similar statistics. I fear these kids see people like the Paul brothers or famous video game players and crave their freedom, wealth, and fame. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with craving any of that. Here's where I think the problem lies. These kids aren't using their early lives to discover what they're truly passionate about. They're squandering their opportunities and potential. They're following not their own passions, but trends which populate in the media world fastest. They're chasing virality in whatever purview most quickly integrates them into internet fame. I personally know a small handful of people who do just this. They jump on board with the trend, trying to get their video as many views as possible. They'll start making videos, shorts, or reels of them gaming, realize it isn't getting them enough traction to get their channel monetized, and then they will completely switch to making clips of them reviewing random tech products, and then onto them doing pranks to people in grocery stores or other public areas. There are entire subreddits of people making posts asking, "What type of content should I make?" Or, "What should my niche be?" Shouldn't having something to say precede you wanting to say something? Shouldn't having something to show people precede you wanting to show something to people? Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." If you change your identity by conforming to an algorithm every time you realize you aren't getting applauded by the masses, what are you repeatedly doing? Who or what even are you? And how can you come to know yourself in this way? To conform to an algorithm's demands is to aim at the wrong spot of the moving target. Are cooking videos being watched? Okay, I'll record myself cooking, even though I've never had an interest in cooking. If that doesn't work, are reaction videos still trending? Great, I'll do an over-emphatic reaction to viral content people have already seen too much of. That didn't work. People are watching a lot of ASMR still? I'll whisper weird things into the mic and see if that gets my video into the algorithm. These people aren't learning about their interests, what makes them happy, or developing themselves into the highest functioning members of society, or preparing for their future. They're conforming to the demands of what other people's dopamine receptors want from them in a however many second long video. It is simply better to follow your interests. Could attempting to make viral videos be a medium in which someone finds what they're passionate about? It's absolutely possible. But even if that were true of a majority of people who enter the world of content creation with no more specific goals than simply wanting to be a content creator, I'm going to opine throughout this section that that is a risk not worth taking. If you started creating content as a YouTube viewing addict, then chased virality and started cooking videos because they were trending, and your net result was not becoming a famous YouTuber, but finding a love for cooking while you posted to YouTube, that's actually great. But certain activities are more or less productive or self-transforming. In the cooking example, it could be great. If you make cooking videos and you never make a live off creating cooking content, you will have at least developed cooking skills and found a meaningful hobby in that whole endeavor. However, if you're solely posting reaction videos, uploading videos of you gaming, which, by the way, are two of the most watched categories on YouTube, or if you're only chasing what's viral, changing your niche, as they say in the YouTube community, every few weeks, you're likely wasting your time because you have unspecified aim and are learning few, if any, transferable skills. When I was growing up, people would aim at becoming a firefighter, an astronaut, rock star, or a professional basketball player. Now studies are saying a vast majority of people want to be content creators? What a low bar. Some of the former examples may be grandiose, sure, but they're worth desiring because it's a specific aim where you learn skills along the way. If you've made it or failed as an astronaut, you've learned remarkable math skills, learned diligence through years of schooling, and have a story to tell. If you've made it or failed as a firefighter, you're likely in good physical condition and have the confidence of being a noble person, which can greatly contribute to society's safety and happiness. If you've beaten all odds and made it as a content creator, you've likely missed out on those prior byproducts. Sure, pursuing content creation is fun, and you may not like me telling you not to chase it, but I don't think it's worth aiming at for most people. The easy lifestyle is reported as one of the main incentives for those wanting to be content creators. This is often why they crave that career. Yet nobody actually wants an easy life. This technology age keeps us glued to our phones and tricks us into thinking it's what we want. In our distraction, we're kept away from the harder work, which provides skills and a life we actually want. The easier life is not one to be desired. If you really think about what an easy life looks like for the modern, lazy teenage boy, to take an example, who could actually think it's ideal? I encourage you to check out Phil Zimbardo, the Stanford psychologist's TED Talk, Why Boys Are Failing, talking about how a large percentage of teenage boys are wasting time addicted to video games, junk food, and porn. What percentage of teenage boys actually rest their head on their pillow after a full day of doom scrolling, missing workouts, eating like shit, playing video games, and masturbating all day, and says to themselves, I could not be any more happy with how I spent my time today. It's totally conducive to the future I want. Turns out, not very many. Simply having the label content creator in the lexicon gives people who spend time in this way a sense of false hope that their time being spent in this way can be transferred to a viable career. Do you think this person would rather give up video games, bad habits, and go find a job? Or tell themselves they don't have to change a thing if they just upload videos of them doing it? I know not all content creators or wannabe content creators spend their time in this way, and there's a bunch of different stereotypes. but I do believe merely populating the term content creator is enabling that behavior. We are wired to overcome struggles and need the associated sense of accomplishment that comes with overcoming struggles. I've always half sarcastically told my roommate, these two terms, influencer and content creator, will never be used in our house. We do a self-help podcast together, so I suppose we are influencers and content creators to some degree. But we have an ethos and very specific goals, whereas many so-called content creators are simply hoping to make easy money, chasing what they think is easy work. But more directly, because we never have or ever will aim at making whatever content for the sake of merely making content. That is what platforms such as YouTube and TikTok have become. Platforms where people just make content, as opposed to original content, or content that's relevant to their interests. Me and my co-host care about using martial arts, practical philosophy, and psychology to help people become the best versions of themselves. And we've landed on creating content for podcasting, social media, and YouTube as a means to propagate the ideas we believe can help people. Saying you want to become a content creator or an influencer hardly describes what you want to do. Saying you want to be a content creator is like saying, I want to be a worker. Well, what type of work do you want to do? What type of content do you wish to create? More seriously, in which direction do you plan to influence people? Creating online content for your business is a salient way in this era to grow a business. But pursuing content creation as a career isn't going to let you reap the benefits of self-knowledge. Look, as long as you're not infringing on another person's well-being, people should be free to chase whatever they want as far as I'm concerned. But I hope people can start to see that you can't find out who you are if you are drastically changing what you do with your life every couple of weeks. And that's what conforming to online trends distracts you from. Knowing yourself. Find out who you are first. Then you will already know what ideas you'd want to share. Peter Singer has a YouTube channel. Does that make him a content creator you should aspire to be like? Sure, but not because he made a YouTube by finding a niche and then making videos. He's a philosopher. He has published dozens and dozens of widely read articles and books, and has spent decades teaching philosophy at an Ivy League university, and then made a YouTube to further sharing his ideas. Brian Keating has a YouTube. Does that make him a content creator you should aspire to be like? Again, sure, but not because he possesses the traits of virality and successfully hacked the YouTube algorithm. He's a cosmologist, teaching at the University of California, San Diego, and he almost won a Nobel Prize. These men pursued their interest, persevered through competition, and displayed years of diligence to know themselves. Many people won't get that chance if they are pursuing the path of content creator over satisfying their interests. If you have a passion and an urge to share that passion with people, it makes sense to want to create the relevant content to share that passion and connect with like-minded individuals. If you have a love for photography or videography, YouTube and social media are made just for you. If you have profound ideas in your head and a deep burning desire to express them, what a great avenue this is to distribute them and get them reviewed and critiqued. I always encourage people to chase their dreams, even if it's a Hail Mary. I even have a video on the subject on my YouTube channel titled, What Happened to Ambition? Imploring people to aim higher. But chasing virality is not aiming higher. Again, saying something like, when I grow up, I want to be a content creator or an influencer, as I've joked about, is like saying, when I grow up, I want to be a worker. I want to work for a living. Again, what type of worker? What type of work do you want to do? What type of content do you wish to create? And who do you want to influence? If content creation is what you want to do with your future, I'm afraid you are likely aiming at such a vague goal that you will not be on a path long enough to develop any transferable skills and are missing some of life's greatest attractions in the process. But again, more generally, that path rids you of so many opportunities because it often keeps you glued to screens. I think the percentage of kids growing up desiring the profession of content creator is testament to an overuse of screens and how distracted we are by them. What are these people really chasing with this vague goal of content creator as a profession? If you chase this, what are you going to do with your future? What are you going to put on your future resume? Again, why want this? An easy life? Many people probably think they want that, but nothing worth having comes easy. Section 2. Means and ends. In philosophy, we often talk about the difference between means and ends. An ends is a state of consciousness to achieve for its own sake. Why do we want to be happy? Because being happy is worth doing for its own sake. Once you're truly happy, you need little or nothing else. Means are simply a direction to achieve an ends. Why do we eat food? Because the flavors or nutrients of foods alter our emotions in a way that either give us a fleeting sense of happiness or help us avoid negative states of mind, such as starvation and death. But nobody would argue we should all eat food for the sake of eating food. Everything we do to change our conscious experience. We work out to grow our muscles and gain confidence. We earn money to get the peace of financial freedom and relieve stress. We drink caffeine to make ourselves more alert and energetic. We help others to give ourselves a feeling of purpose in the world. And we find love to feel connection and intimacy. We are always aiming to make ourselves happy, whether we realize this or not. But we are often bad stewards of giving ourselves what we need most, or we are bad at reaching our ends directly. We consume a surplus of junk food because we think the joy we receive from the flavors will outweigh the weight gain and shame we receive as a consequence. We avoid workouts because we think the comfort of sitting at home will outweigh the physical and mental benefits the hard workout will grant us. Yet the psychology is out on these scenarios. We actually know, scientifically, which decision is healthier for our brains and which, therefore, makes us happier. I'm not saying that it is never the right answer to eat something sweet, or always wrong to relax instead of work out. But most of us take the easier path more often, because we subconsciously think the decision we made will make us happy. Yet in both of these scenarios, these poor choices are done more than they should be. In other words, we're often wrong about what we actually want. On the same token, we overindulge in our screens, because in the moments we doom scroll, we can easily misunderstand it as a better way to spend time for ourselves. We are often not realizing that the fleeting joy we get from a few minutes of scrolling each time we pull out our phones is not comparable to the delayed gratification of reading or conversing with someone instead. Just look around you. We all know objectively that proper sleep, healthy food, reduced screen time, plenty of exercise, and in-person social interaction is good for the human brain and conducive to happiness. Yet nearly half of U.S. citizens are obese, and depression and anxiety are skyrocketing because these good habits are done less, because we are seeking the easy, instant gratification, which we fool ourselves into thinking we want, which is why we do it. The famous Canadian physician, Dr. Gabor Mate, defines addiction as any behavior that a person finds relief and therefore craves in the short term, but suffers negative consequences in the long term and doesn't give up despite the negative consequences. So, are we taking the easy route because we're misled by what we think we want and are wrong about? Or because we are addicted to short-term satisfaction? Surely it's a little of both, but the point remains. We are not getting the ends in which we actually want. We are too commonly craving the short-term means with negative consequences and not craving the delayed gratification. I believe that throughout my whole adolescence, I was some type of closeted philosopher. I just hadn't discovered philosophy at that time. I always loved nuance and deep conversation. In retrospect, I always found myself trying to get to the foundation of any moral dilemma. It wasn't until my mid-20s, which was just a matter of a few years ago, that I realized I have a burning passion for philosophy after I started to study it seriously. I found a parasite gnawing at me from the inside out, perhaps quite literally attempting to kill me if I didn't outwardly express the thoughts and ideas in my head. I'm not making any metaphysical claim about destiny or divine revelation, but there's no doubt that I have the genes, experiences, and whatever other variables might contribute to that interest. It is clear that it more than interests me. The problem was that it took me about 25 years to figure this out. From about age 12 to 25, I did very little with my life other than play video games and watch porn. And I never felt mentally healthy during that time. I always felt something was missing. Yet I was never looking for it. Needless to say, I never accidentally discover it in video games or porn. During that time, I had a couple of bouts with depression. Looking back, it was clear that my bad diet, unstructured sleep schedule, and lack of exercise clearly contributed to this illness. Even after I regulated my physical health, I've had a couple bouts with depression. One of which stemmed from a very difficult time in my life, which again spiraled my bad habits further south. Another bout, however, seemed to have been conjured from feeling lost and alone. I had a job, was working out, sleeping and eating decently, yet I still felt mentally off. I felt as if I was lacking connection, yet I had friends. Part of me felt repressed. I had no one to discuss my greatest passion with, at least not consistently. So, I decided to revamp my philosophy channel on YouTube to grant myself the space to empty the contents of my constantly racing mind. The relief was instant and indisputable. Studying ethics, metaphysics, and epistemology is difficult. It's not easy, but for me, it's proven worthwhile. It helps me reach the ends of happiness much more efficaciously. Rotting my brain via video games, porn, and doom scrolling was always appealing and fun in the moment, but it never led to stable happiness. Yet I have often, to my demise, chosen to pursue those instead. At the end of the day, instant gratification is never what I desire. When I was at the thickest of my video game addict stage, I was living as sedentary a life one can imagine. I would not work out directly for the sake of my health. I would not work out indirectly for the sake of doing a hobby that kept me active. Had I stayed this way, I would have never found out I have a passion for one of the most physically demanding activities in the history of existence. Ironic, huh? Most people who know me as a fighter. Knowing myself as a fighter has been a desirable outcome. It gave me a job I now have, which is a martial arts coach. It's given me respect among just about everyone. Thankfully, people understand the challenge surrounding it. It gave me a thoroughly enjoyable way to stay in shape. When I'm at my worst, I am lazy, doom scrolling all the time, and I'm impulsive, only distracting myself with nearby simple pleasures. Until I can't. Then I get profoundly unhappy, and am of no use to my loved ones. When I'm at my best, I am mentally sharp and influential. Knowing myself as a fighter and aspiring philosopher has given me a life with a future. I now know where to aim, and I have so much to look forward to. I am living an examined life which is worth living, for myself and for those whom I may influence and benefit. I learned about myself by persevering through my interests, and there is no doubt in my mind that it has been for the better for me and other people. Section 3. Know your interests, know yourself. As soon as YouTube started to monetize its platform's users, more people started to create, and people gradually started to care much less about their own interests and ideas, and much more about what people get captured by. This is when those aforementioned subreddits emerged. Once people go this route, they sell out. They lose themselves. Then, the digital sphere becomes inundated with the same type of recycled content, and originality becomes more scarce. If you explore your own destiny, your own interests, you find the utility you can provide the world in your own uniqueness. Where is the master who could have taught Shakespeare? Asked 19th century poet and philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson. Where is the master who could have instructed Washington, or Bacon, or Newton? Every great person is unique. What Emerson was saying in this quote was that, who knows? Who could have possibly taught these titans of human progress and genius? Everybody knows these men and what they've contributed, but who knows the names of their teachers? These great men contributed to the world by knowing themselves, by being fully immersed in what interested them. That's how they became great. I'm not saying people should never shitpost and that every individual can only share that which they're most passionate about. What I'm saying is, ask yourself what you want in life and who you want to influence, and make sure you're being true to yourself and your interests. But wanting to be social media famous at the expense of disregarding your interests or prominence in your real life is not worth it for yourself or those around you. The emergence of smartphones is recent. Yet already, our time is spent in the digital world way longer than it should be, and our time exploring the real world is way shorter than it should be. We are now experts when it comes to knowing ridiculous slang words, mainstream music, TikTok dances, and memes. We come out of the womb holding smartphones and become engulfed in social media and digital entertainment before we have the opportunity to see what else captures our attention. When we display boredom in a new topic we're learning in school, we're diagnosed with an attention deficit disorder and given medication, or granted too much leniency to stay diligent. If we say we have anxiety, many of us are excused from doing a task our professor assigns us. When we have this many ways to bypass hard or seemingly boring work, we're robbed of a chance to know what we're made of, and blocked from an opportunity to learn something about ourselves or what may interest us. And if all your time is spent watching content on YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok, you will have no other interests other than the type of content you see on YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok. The reason most kids in school now want to be content creators when they grow up is not just because making videos looks like so much fun to them. It is because they are bombarded with so many videos and trends that they haven't been sufficiently exposed to other fields which may interest them. Emphasis on being sufficiently exposed. Some of them might have the exact genetic makeup and childhood experiences to make them obsessed with a certain field of study if they get sufficiently involved with it. But if they turn around the second they realize that developing interest and competence in that area is harder than staying glued to their phone, they miss out on finding themselves and what their very soul was destined for. The Austrian psychologist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl once said, "When one can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure." I think the reciprocal is just as true. When you distract yourself with pleasure, you can't find a deep sense of meaning. Know your limits, know your interests, know yourself. Know yourself, become autonomous, become happy. That knowledge is where meaning lies. That meaning will give you reason to live with contentment. Section 4. Autonomy. Dr. Gabor Mate lays out a potential framework for pursuing mental and physical well-being called the 7 A's of healing. These are 7 steps that he believes one can take to begin ridding the body of stress, chronic illness, and disease. He explains these lead to mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. I suggest everyone look further into his 7 A's on healing. I've also done a podcast about it as well. You can learn more about it there. But I wanted to focus on his 4th A, autonomy. He defines autonomy as simply allowing yourself to have independent thoughts and actions. They are the boundaries that are specific to you and your own values and beliefs. Developing your personal boundaries and knowing yourself honestly is the way that you can contribute to understanding your own priorities, needs, and desires. For example, questions to help you think about autonomy are, is this something I really want, or is this something someone else wants? Am I doing this to put up appearances or make someone else happy? Establishing those clear boundaries can help you avoid stress when you find the freedom to gain control in your own life and release the need for control in the lives of others. In order to find out what we need, what we value, what our priorities should be, and who we are, we need to be exposed to an array of different things in life. From there, we can go through a process of elimination, discard the fields of study or hobbies that don't interest us. If we keep our eyes glued to a screen, we don't get this exposure, and are either never given the chance to know ourselves, or only learn to know ourselves after years of unnecessary suffering. If you want to become autonomous, Dr. Mate suggests to set boundaries and be assertive. He says setting boundaries and healing yourself involves 2 main steps: recognizing the impact of childhood trauma on your boundary issues, and practicing some assertiveness techniques. Recognizing what has hurt you in the past can help you understand your current limits and help you prioritize your own needs, values, and interests over those of others. From there, you can practice being assertive with that, using words or gestures unaggressively that state your being and help yourself and others realize you do not need justification to be autonomous. He says, "We are who we are, and we have the right to be here, to think and feel, to love and be loved." Once we have accepted ourselves, it becomes important to live in alignment with our true self and others. Becoming autonomous can help you discover and pursue your passions and purposes. By regulating your emotions, you can find and follow your interests and goals, unleash your creativity and potential, achieve more success and satisfaction, and find more meaning and fulfillment in your life. Autonomy has been an important trait in my development, happiness, and quest for self-knowledge. But it took me years to pull myself out of the bad habits which prevented me from being autonomous. I'm convinced bad incentives and screen abuse often hinder individual autonomy. If we want the freedom and peace of autonomy, some individual and collective changes can be made. But some things have interfered with our quest for self-knowledge and autonomy. Section 5. Cultural Decline. Hobbies and Leisure. When everyone is captured by the same TikTok trends, Instagram reels, and hobbies, or lack of hobbies, those naturally drawn to different forms of leisure feel left out. Culturally, diversity of interest then peters out. Individuality peters out. To those of you who thoroughly enjoy painting, or poetry, or some other now obscure interest, how hard is it to find like-minded friends? I'd imagine you don't come across people every day and get to express your passion of painting or poetry to each other in a way where you both really get it. These were once incredibly populated fields of interest. Now, I can't name a single friend or acquaintance of mine who paints or writes poetry. That's a problem for those who took brave steps to be themselves to paint or write poetry, and anyone else who's following those interests. But there's also the problem that most of us have also since converged on the same forms of entertainment. Screens. Not all, but many people I know share the same routine of going home after work to their phones, video games, or TV shows. As American social psychologist Jonathan Haidt has shown, this causes an increase in anxiety, depression, self-harm, and suicide in Gen Z. But it's certainly costly for millennials and perhaps older folk as well. To be transparent and come from a somewhat selfish angle, there's at least one part of this cultural decline that I'm emotionally attached to. From my experience, it's lonely as someone deeply invested in philosophy. I wish I could talk about it with my best friends, or find a best friend already interested in it. It's actually taken quite some effort to find people who I can connect with about philosophy. As a student of the subject, I can name maybe 2 people I've encountered who I can deeply talk to about the history of philosophy, metaphysics, or epistemology. It even seems very hard for me to find people who enjoy reading the same literature as I read. From Dostoevsky to Ursula Le Guin to Cormac McCarthy. And these aren't exactly small names. Dostoevsky is one of the most popular authors ever. Le Guin and McCarthy were among the most popular contemporary fiction writers, not just some nobodies. And just to be clear, no part of me expects everyone to find interest in a thing just because I have an interest in it. If I were a rock collector, for example, I would never expect or advocate people get away from their screens and more people get on board with rock collecting with me. In the same way I don't expect metaethics to grip everyone's attention like it does mine, I wouldn't expect rock collecting to be found interesting by many people. Sorry to any rock collectors who may be listening. Of course niche areas of interest are going to have less people interested. That is what it means to be niche. I worry about the decline of the humanities, especially philosophy, not just because my community is dying and I have less people to connect with on philosophy, but because the humanities help us understand ourselves. And without the humanities, culture decays. We should worry when people veer away from the humanities because our screens keep any captive who may have a potential interest in it. Philosophy, for example, teaches us how to think, how to argue, how to keep an open mind. Not to mention, it was the precursor study to every study there has ever existed after it. I'd argue that veering from philosophy to something else is not just some arbitrary change of interest. It's bad. We need to know how to think. Philosophy is the exemplar of how to do so. Our interest diverging away from a plethora of unique fields of study is ruining culture and making us lose ourselves, not teach us who we are. Working to earn. As of 2020, the most popular major at universities within the US is business, with 19%. Why do you think that is? Because everyone is fascinated with the complexity of money and numbers and feels as if they're doing the thing that aligns most with their calling? For some of us, sure. But for most, because we're obviously solely incentivized by money. In capitalist societies, we correlate money with success. Money's not a horrible thing to be incentivized by, but it has become so focused on that I wonder if there are some who literally cannot fathom anything else to live for. Let's go back to means and ends. Money can relieve stress, buy us luxuries that give us a moment of pleasure, and, if used selflessly, even be a philanthropic means to help the less fortunate. We know that money can contribute to a happy life, but again, well-being is the main goal, and aiming at money is not always the most direct route towards well-being, especially if you have to give up something you love in order to pursue it. We all work to earn. Earning money is a great reason to work, but it's not the only product. Wouldn't you be happier if it was a byproduct? Wouldn't you rather do your favorite activity for money? Work to feel value? Wouldn't you like your work to be an expression of who you are and what you care most about in this life, even if that work pays less money? I'm at a place in my life where I may have to give up hours working a job I genuinely love doing in order to find different work that pays more. This is actually leaving me somewhat depressed. I've spent time working at mind-numbing jobs in warehouses, print shops, and on boats. And for the last 2 years, I've been doing work that has made me so appreciative of life that I told myself I would never go back to working any other type of job. Doing something you love to do as a job truly doesn't feel like working. And I've been living that fantasy for 2 years now, and it's let me help others. It's meaningful. I don't want to change that. We're all incentivized or forced to sell out, to create a business or pursue work not because we love the process or are passionate about a product, but to make more money than the next guy. This competition causes stress and contributes to inflation, leaving us even more incentivized to deny our quest for self-knowledge to make more money. We are thus dragged even further from knowing ourselves. This is what life has become in the US. At least I can say I've known myself, that I know my interests, that I know what I love, and that I've taken brave steps to pursue it. I've loved martial arts, and have displayed the bravery to rise to the level of competition and winning a championship fight in MMA. I've been interested in philosophy, and have had the gall to study it, practice it, and make my own YouTube channel and podcast to express it. I am unapologetically myself, and that creative outlet has relieved more suffering than money ever could have. I may have to follow suit and chase money for a while, but at least I can say I have learned about myself and will continue to try to know myself. And I hope more than anything to get back to full-time work doing what I love. Work that is an honest expression of who I am. This life is hard enough. If one has persevered through life, working a corporate job, haven't done anything exceptionally unethical, yet haven't taken initiative to do more, and are genuinely happy and die happy, who am I to condemn that? They may not have contributed much to the rest of the world, but at least they didn't leave it worse than when they entered. Of course, if one has pursued and achieved a place of status or wealth by manipulating, coercing, or some other unethical means to get where they are, perhaps they are good for their corporation, but they are no good to the rest of us. This type of person would not be making the world a better place. I'm sure a handful of people feel trapped in a job or whole career they feel they can't leave, because without it, they won't have the financial means to pay their bills. But to maximize your happiness and your contribution towards others, you need to know yourself. Now imagine a scenario which may be true for a lot of people. Kids are being born with iPads in their hands, losing their interest in real-world hobbies because of their indulgence in the virtual world, and then told only to make money in order to be successful. Let's say they accomplish that. When this person is at the end of their life, after outliving most of their family, staring at the hospital ceiling on their last 2 weeks of life, and they're asking themselves, who was I? Will they have anything more to say than, I was a successful businessman? When that person is writing their memoir, will anyone be inspired? Will anyone even care to read it? Was their pursuit in life worth it? Not just for themselves, but for other people. These are the questions that I ask myself and keep myself up with at night. When I'm on my deathbed, I want the objective certainty that I've contributed to a better world for people. What else could be our purpose in life? Section 6. What world would you rather live in? What world do you want to live in? One where everyone is glued to their screens, inarticulate because few read or have a genuine drive for knowledge, where everyone's exalting money over self-knowledge, where no one lives for other people or anything greater than themselves, and where people don't know themselves or can't act like themselves. Or a world where people are always aiming to reach their potential because they're not distracted from seeing the value in that endeavor. Where people are less socially anxious, more confident in talking to each other, and have a deeper sense of connection with themselves, society, and therefore feel value and self-worth? The latter, surely. Why then do most people now fail to find their interests in hobbies or work, spend an inordinate amount more time doom scrolling instead of reading good books, or text on phones instead of visiting friends in person? Not because it's the world they'd rather live in and contribute to. It's simply easier. But being complacent with the modern day incentive structure and phone generation is not morally permissible. It's being a passive accomplice to the anxiety, depression, and our culture's decline. I think this very ambiguity of what people are desiring outside of their own interests is another sign of societal decline, a collapse of effort, of interest, of culture. To crave that which seems easiest or most replicable is to fail to see the byproducts brought about by original, passionate work. Work that is worth doing despite the financial return. Work composed of tasks you would likely do even if you were never paid for it. That is an interest that helps you know yourself and contribute to a functioning society. That is work that is worth doing, and work which always has a perfect candidate suited for it. Plus, find a job you like doing and you'll never work a day in your life, right? Each one of us has different passions and experiences that make us perfectly suited to be fully invested on a specific type of path, and therefore play a perfect role for what other people need in a community. I know people who are all in on business or finance or law. Personally, I cannot fathom being obsessed with fields so boring to me. I am fascinated with philosophy, a field which many people can't even explain, don't know anything about, or find outright boring themselves. But that is just my point. People are naturally drawn to different fields, and those in the field of what interests them are generally better at what they do. Yet we're more often than not incentivized to pursue that which interests us most, unless that which interests us most is financially viable. If people are truly happy pursuing nothing but financial freedom, and they don't have an urge to express or take on more, fair. But in my experience, that isn't even a modicum of what is out there. At least that's not how people talk about their career or desired future. Everyone has some complaints, sure. But how rare is it to find people in the job they actually set out to get? Or one in which they genuinely wouldn't pick anything different? It's as if it's the norm now to pick a job you don't love. Imagine living in a world where everyone is doing what they love and what they're best at. Imagine how much that world would flourish. As we lose our autonomy and fail to follow our interests, we lose the freedom of being unapologetically ourselves. I actually don't fear some imminent Orwellian dystopia here in the West, or some brave new world, even though we're kind of already there. I'm hardly saying this because of any prediction I may have. I really have none. I'm saying this because of the present, and the hell I bring myself, and I'm sure millions of others bring themselves, by stunting our growth with bad incentives or screen abuse. I want to be the best version of myself, for myself, and for other people. For me, this consists of reading more, furthering my education, improving my writing and organizing my chaotic thoughts, improving my brand here at A Better Life Walkthrough, fighting more frequently and training harder. This makes me happier and more pleasant to be around for other people. What world do you all want to live in? One where Peter is involved in all that, happy, involved in coaching duties passionately, and therefore nicer to everyone and more apt to do favors for people? Or a world where Peter is lazy, moody, impulsive, uninterested, and not helpful? The former? Same. Yet the other week I wanted to accomplish all of those things and be that prior version. And I wasn't. You know what I did instead? I doom scrolled all morning and watched a show on HBO instead of going to jiu-jitsu or MMA practice. That made me disappointed in myself. I put on a little weight. It made me grumpy. I was not as invested in my job for that week. It threw off my sleep schedule. It probably caused me to miss out on some opportunity here or there. I was not the best version of myself. That all happens occasionally. More than I wish. That does not contribute to the world other people want to live in, where I am enhancing their well-being. It is therefore an ethical obligation for me to take care of myself and learn how to do so correctly. If we want to live in a world where people are the best versions of themselves, we need to contribute to that world by being the best versions of ourselves. The harder path is not just avoided because it's harder. It is so detached from us often that it is not given proper contemplation. Fewer and fewer people are contemplating the life of a teacher, artist, historian, or whatever else the best version of themselves may manifest as, because it's not even in their periphery sometimes. All that is YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, or money. You'll never find your love for spiritually elating, stable income-producing, meaning-inducing work if you're only consuming mainstream social media content or pursuing the highest pay. It takes time to find out what you're interested in. I started jiu-jitsu as a white belt. The first week was amazing. Then it got hard, and I became greatly uninterested in it. If I quit then, I would have never found a love in jiu-jitsu. I had to find my interest through persevering through all the hard phases of being a white and blue belt. After about 8 years now, I'm finally a purple belt, and I'm not the best at it, but I now know enough about it to enjoy it. And I still have years left of jiu-jitsu to do in order to learn more knowledge. And I'm so encouraged by the fact that I have much longer to go until I exhaust my love with that hobby. The early stages of an endeavor, such as computer science, physics, medicine, philosophy, art, creative writing, or whatever else the best version of yourself may manifest as, are not welcoming for everyone. That doesn't mean we object to them at first exposure. Many may feel as if they're interested in one of these purviews just to be turned away when their competence in this area gets tested. The work in areas such as these doesn't always get easier. Why desire the life of a neurosurgeon when the life of a neurosurgeon does not start until after a decade of schooling? Because it may eventually interest you, and it's worth the delayed gratification if it's what your personality is compatible with. Not to mention, it's very hard and important work in a field that I'm sure could always benefit from more people in the field. Why desire the life of a physicist when the life of a physicist demands thorough mathematical competence? Because new physics greatly contributes to what a society can produce, and you may find out your soul was destined to love physics. The best version of yourself might just be a physicist. These fields may be what the best version of yourself manifests as. For some of us, the path of delayed gratification will make ourselves happier, but can also revive the culture in our society. Sometimes you have to spend time in a subject, or a field, or a hobby to find out you have an interest in it. But kids are not doing this because that is so much harder than sticking to a phone. You don't have to persevere through any discomfort on your screens. You just have to sit there and continue to take it in. If you're watching YouTube and TikTok since age 6, playing Minecraft and Call of Duty with your friends in your free time, watching TV shows when you go over to a friend's house, and doom scrolling every time you're taking a shit, forced to wait in line, driving in the passenger seat of a car, or eating dinner? How are you going to be exposed to the, albeit harder or more complicated, but different paths in life? I've mentioned this many times because it's true. I could have started my career 10 years earlier had I not squandered years of my life addicted to video games, porn, and doom scrolling. I'm certain I would have found my passion for philosophy and psychology earlier, graduated college earlier, had better income, and not set myself so far back in life had I not been addicted to instant gratification from screen abuse. And I'm pissed off at myself for all of that. Don't do what I did. Enjoy whatever entertainment you want now and then, but don't consume it so much that you don't even get to figure out what parts of life you're interested in. And be honest with yourself. Don't think you can quit whenever you want. It's all too easy to get addicted nowadays, and then it becomes too late. Again, just ask yourself, what world do you want to live in? A world where people are doing what's best for themselves and they have the most interest in, and therefore what they're best at. A world where everyone is the best versions of themselves, and therefore contributing more to you. Or a world where everyone is working a job they don't want to work, complaining about it daily, and stuck in the same routine of complaining about their job, then going home to watch the same TV shows, play the same video games, and then wake up the next day and repeat that cycle. Produce more than you consume. If you're one of the ones stuck in this cycle like I was, it's hard to imagine finding the time to produce anything for anyone else at all. Do you want to live in a world of sheer consuming? What I'm hoping to accomplish here is some inspiration. It's also a bit of a warning. I've brought myself so much suffering doing the very things I'm urging people not to do. In the words of the ancient Roman poet Virgil, being myself no stranger to suffering, I have learned to relieve the suffering of others. I hope to use my story to spare people of the discomfort I've given myself from wasting time in these ways. I believe the older demographic makes an infinitesimal percentage of those who fail to find themselves or get lost by problematic screen use. The younger generations are the most vulnerable and the most miserable, which, as I've shared, the data supports. Section 7. The Anxious Generation. If you, as someone around my age or older, have ever experienced any type of screen addiction or overindulgence in your phone, video games, social media, or if you're one of the many people who are slightly disturbed with seeing a time lapse of a crowded public area with dozens of people nearly running into each other with their heads looking down as if their chins were glued to their chest because they can't peel their eyes off their phones, then you realize how the notion of discipline hardly makes sense regarding this conundrum. Are you discontent with how much your screen time is intruding on your productivity? You are? Okay, well stop spending time on your screen. It's not that easy, is it? Even with viable solutions, such as app blockers or an enriching outer circle of hobbies, it's quite difficult to moderate, isn't it? These devices are simply more powerful than our discipline. Our smartphones are smarter than we are. Smartphones get the best of some of the best adults in our society. And just about everybody expresses how they tend to get distracted by them and wish they could use them less. Now imagine being younger and more impulsive, without a fully developed prefrontal cortex, and obtaining these devices, which is true for many of these kids, since birth. As the author of The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt, has shown, early obsessive phone exposure is rewiring our brains. We simply cannot continue to idly stand by and judge the skyrocketing phone consumption and blame the user's lack of discipline. We need to protect young kids. We need to reduce phone exposure and screen time to bring about that improvement. In the opening paragraph of Chapter 5 in The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt shares a story. One morning, on a family trip to Vermont in 2016, my 6-year-old daughter was playing a video game on my iPad. She called out to me, "Daddy, can you take the iPad away from me? I'm trying to take my eyes off it, but I can't." My daughter was in the grip of a variable ratio reinforcement schedule administered by the game designers, which is the most powerful way to take control of an animal's behavior short of implanting electrodes in the brain. That is what these kids are up against. We cannot only judge their bad habits. We need to rescue them from the technology companies have created to manipulate them. And why do you think companies and people create products intentionally designed to keep kids addicted to screens? Because they have bad incentives. They're not incentivized to know themselves or get children to develop in a healthy way where they are set up to know themselves. They're incentivized to make more money than their competitors at the cost of children's mental health. I believe we have a responsibility to minimize these distractions in our daily lives to simply make ourselves less miserable and be better contributors to society. But for the future generations, we need to help minimize these distractions for them because many of them can't do it for the same reasons people like me haven't been able to. Our discipline can't break technology's grip, and we should no longer expect it to. The younger generations get exposed to screens and get addicted. The most viable solution is to keep them from getting exposed, especially early on. It is hard for many of us adults to separate from these distractions and know ourselves. Some of us have lost our souls by selling out or pouring all of ourselves into the digital world. But today's kids might not even get a chance to realize they have a soul. It would be hard to reap the benefits of autonomy if one is not even aware. And none of this is considering the issues that AI could bring. We'll leave that for a separate topic. All of my writing, thinking, recording was done with the intent to show how culture has been dying, with the lack of appreciation for blue-collar work, social life, and interest in the humanities. But I can't expect younger generations to care when interest in the real world dies with overexposure to the virtual world. It shows how deep the problem lies. And I'm certainly convinced there is enough evidence that we can call it a problem. In fact, I'd consider it a moral emergency. Let's fix this as soon as possible so that Gen Z will be more productive and less depressed and stop killing themselves. I highly suggest everyone read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, cover to cover. Google #FreeTheAnxiousGeneration. Check out Jonathan Haidt's interviews on trigonometry, the Huberman Lab, and Mark Manson's podcast, and look into his collection Action Problems, consisting of banning phones from schools, banning social media before the age of 16, and many other ways that parents and teachers can collaborate with each other to revive the mental health of Gen Z. Section 8. The Trial. Socrates claimed throughout his studies that the only good was knowledge. Knowledge, he believed, was the means to true contentment. He came to know himself through his philosophizing. Part of his philosophy, however, consisted of denying many of the gods of the ancient Greeks. He additionally believed that he had a daimonion, a living voice inside him, influencing his thoughts and ideas. Because of this, his teachings towards his students were viewed as pious, and he was accused of corrupting the youth of Greece and accused of being sacrilegious towards the gods of the Greeks. Socrates' commitment to self-knowledge became his end. Because of his beliefs and his teachings, he was placed on trial, and the jurors would either sentence him to death by drinking a poisonous hemlock beverage or exile him, where he would no longer be able to study and pursue self-knowledge. Socrates believed nothing was more noble than pursuing knowledge. He picked up the drink of hemlock and drank it as a draught of wine, believing he would be able to study and learn in the afterlife, exclaiming, "The unexamined life is not worth living." The importance of learning about yourself and your purpose in life is of utmost importance for your autonomy, happiness, and service towards others. Conclusion. Who are you? What more can you do for others? Have you had a chance to discover yet? It's time we all find those answers to improve ourselves and those around us. Because of technology's utility, we're making progress in many areas. But as the apogees of human progress have been rising, the perigees have been sinking. A progressive, even if gradual, equilibrium would be ideal. not an expanding gap between our best and our worst. We don't want our poorest getting poorer while our richest get richer. We don't want our dumbest getting dumber while our wisest get wiser. We all want to grow collectively. Physicists stand on the shoulders of giants like Galileo, Newton, and Einstein and expand on the work they've contributed. Philosophers stand on the shoulders of Socrates, Hume, and Wittgenstein and expand on the ideas they've shared. Psychologists stand on the shoulders of Jung, Watson, and James and develop their theories into practices which greatly enhance mental health. Yet the average person nowadays seems to have little to no drive for knowledge or self-discovery. We have the knowledge of human history in our pockets, and so many of us use our devices not for gaining information on what interests us, but for nothing but entertainment. That is making our poorest poorer and our dumbest dumber. We are all standing on the shoulders of giants, but it's as if many of us are looking straight down, often onto our screens, to then fall off those shoulders into a pit of anxiety and depression, or fall to our death by our own hands. Right now, we are all standing on the shoulders of giants. Which direction are you looking?